Okay.
Hello, PhotoPillers. I think we're finally live. Thank you guys for joining us today. Today we have a special day because today we're going to learn how to shoot legendary photos of the Milky Way. And we're going to do it by the hand of an amazing photographer, of an amazing time-lapser, and also an amazing YouTuber, truly a night sky master. I'm talking about Alyn Wallace. Alyn will give us everything we need to go from an idea to a real Milky Way photo, including, inspiring images, how to plan them, all the gear we need, and also how to use this gear to nail our Milky Way photos. Easy, right? And of course, if you have a question, please leave a comment in the chat or below this video so we can help you. So if you're ready, I am ready. Well, guys, please help me welcome Alyn Wallace. Hey, Alyn.
Hello. Hey, Raphael. How you doing?
What's up, man? Welcome. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
I hope the sound and the image is right. Please, guys, if you can tell us via the chat that everything is working. Battery echo on the audio. Let me... Hello. Alyn, are you wearing sounds good here? Awesome. So awesome. Thank you, guys. It seems that everything is working. Herman, who is at the back end, please tell me if everything is working. Awesome. Okay, Herman is telling me that everything is working. Okay. Let's go back here. Awesome. Now it's working perfectly. So Alyn, sorry for this beginning, but welcome. Thank you for joining me. And today is about Milky Way. And let me tell you, I love your work, your photos. I love your time lapse, and also I love your YouTube videos. You're really spreading the love about for night sky. So it's awesome. Great job, man.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here, man. I love PhotoPills, as you know.
Yeah,
It'd be great to share some tips and some tricks.
Yeah, but we've been in touch for a long time, right?
Yeah, a couple of years now, I think, really.
So for the people that doesn't know you, how did you get started in photography, and how did your passion about night sky began? Tell us a bit about your story.
Oh, the love of the night sky is like since I was a child, and I grew up in Wales in the UK, which is a really dark place. So just really in love with the stars, and it's just the one thing you can't quench your curiosity on. So that was always there, and I studied physics and astronomy at Cardiff University. I then studied mechanical engineering as I worked as an engineer for a few years, and that was when I finally had a bit of money so I could buy myself a camera. I'd always wanted a camera, but as a student, you don't really have much money. But so I bought my first camera because I was going on holiday to Turkey during the same time as the Perseids meteor shower. So I said, right, I'm going to photograph this meteor shower and I'm going to share the images with my friends and family back home. And it kind of just started from there.
Awesome. And by the way, now that you're mentioning that you started with meteor showers, we have a great meteor shower this year, right? With the Perseids in August.
Yes, it should be pretty good. I think the moon is out of the way in the morning, so it should be really good. But I hope the travel restrictions are lifted by then.
I suppose that everybody's like waiting to see photos of your photos. Can you show us something? You have something ready, or?
Yeah, sure.
Awesome. So let's go here and see what's going on here. Yeah.
So yeah, I'm just going to show a few images and talk about the images and the sort of techniques with the Milky Way, because there's obviously loads of different techniques and little tips that I can share with you. But this is a classic sort of what I love to do here in Wales is just to get the tent, go into the wilderness and spend the night under the stars. And I don't sleep in the tent at night. I usually sleep in the tent in the morning once I'm finished photographing the stars in the Milky Way. So yeah, this is how high the Milky Way core gets for me in the UK. And I was just going to show you guys quickly in PhotoPills, just a couple of little tips So you can see PhotoPills, right?
Yeah. Perfect.
And yeah, if I come to my stuff and the plans, and I can bring up the camping plan. So I was camping here on the Gold Coast. I'm going to open this up by going to Action, Send to Planner, so I can come in and do some editing. So, you can see the Milky Way over the dome. So you have to pretend that these concentric circles are like a glass dome around your location, and the dots on the dome are the Milky Way. The bigger dots in the south are obviously the Milky Way core.
Nice.
And with the timeline, obviously, you can see, if I scroll back through time, you can see how the Milky Way sort of rises in the southeast. You can see there the big dots appearing in the southeast. You can see the Milky Way getting higher and higher in the night sky. So this image was taken at the start of Milky Way core season, which is in spring in the Northern Hemisphere, so March, April.
Mm-hmm.
And the best time to photograph the Milky Way then is just before twilight, because that's the point when the Milky Way core is at its highest in the sky, just before the sky starts getting light. And the higher the Milky Way is in the sky, the clearer view you have, because you look into less of Earth's atmosphere. So on this plan, I basically want to find the time that the twilight starts. And what you can do is you can just double tap here, and then you see there at the bottom, astronomical twilight begins at about 3:10. So I know for this particular image, when I was waiting for the Milky Way, the best time to photograph the Milky Way that night was about 3:10 in the morning, because, as I said, that's when the Milky Way is at its highest, before the sky starts to get too light.
That's a beautiful image. Is it a single shot or?
So this is actually stacked.
Stacked?
So you can take, I think, 8 to 10 exposures, the exact same settings, and then you can stack them in. If you're on Windows, you can use a program called Sequator, and if you're on a Mac, you can use a program called Starry Landscape Stacker. And basically, you just take those 8 to 10 images and create an average of them. The foreground and the sky get stacked separately and then reblended back on in the software. The software does all the hard work for you, but that helps get rid of a lot of the noise in a single exposure, so you get a nice clean result. It just makes it look so much better.
Awesome. That's a good tip.
This next image is from probably one of my favorite places in the world. This is from La Palma in the Canary Islands, which actually me and you were supposed to be together with last month.
Yeah, man, we had this trip planned for April, but this coronavirus thing, crisis.
Yeah.
My God.
But here we are in the digital world.
I love this photo. I love this plot.
Yeah. Thank you so much, man. So again, this is a similar story with the Milky Way rising in the southeast and just waiting for it to get nice and high before the twilight started kicking in. But a couple of reasons why I love La Palma. Obviously, it is a very small island with very little built-up area, so there's not much light pollution. And what light pollution there is very controlled, and it's not wasted. It's not excessive light pollution. They're very conscious about light pollution because of all the observatories and the telescopes on the island. But the biggest reason I love La Palma is because, as you can see, I'm standing there on that little rock above the clouds. I'm above a cloud inversion. And this is quite typical for La Palma. You can wake up in your hotel in the morning and it can be raining, but it doesn't bother you because you can just hop in the car, drive above the clouds, and then you've got gorgeous, clear, dark skies above you. So I absolutely love La Palma.
Yeah, definitely beautiful, beautiful clouds there. Sea of clouds.
It's one of my favorite things to be above the clouds and under the stars, and that's like ecstasy, man. It's just pure bliss. Like I could just stand there forever.
How did you approach this image from the composition side of things? Because you have this a plant in the foreground, and it's pretty interesting.
Yeah, I obviously go in the daytime to look for compositions, and I found these 3 interesting sort of spiky rocks, and of course that was a selfie spot. It has to be a selfie spot. But at the same time, I wanted to include something in the foreground just to add that extra layer of depth. Like, it's very difficult to make an image feel 3D. because you've just basically got a flat 2D rectangle. So to try and make the image as 3D as possible, I like to have something in the foreground, something nice and close that just adds an extra layer of depth to the image. And then obviously the composition was largely dictated by the Milky Way, because you can't move the Milky Way. I don't do composites, so I had to be facing that sort of direction. And I could have taken that image the night before, but I really wanted it to be a cloud inversion, because that helps the silhouette of the person and those rocks stand out. If the cloud inversion wasn't there, you wouldn't have that separation of the rocks and the person. So that was quite important as well.
Yeah, definitely you wouldn't be able to see the silhouette there.
Yeah, exactly.
Awesome.
Another image from the next Canary Island over, this one here from Tenerife. Similar time of year, Milky Way rising in the southeast. And I could just show you the plan quickly. So I'll bring up Tenerife Road, and if you look, I'm going to open it in the planner. I'm just going to move the Milky Way out of the way a second. But when I was in Tenerife, I was driving down this road, TF38. Oops, I've lost it. So I'm just going to use the phone quickly. But I was driving down this road, the TF38, and it's just perfectly southeast and just long and straight. Like, look at that road. So I was like, I have to shoot the Milky Way here at some point. Now, when you find the shot, like one of the things you have to ask yourself, especially when you're planning with maps, is how do I get there? So it's worth looking for places to park. So I'm quite lucky. This spot here, there was a nice lay-by, so I knew that I could leave my car somewhere and park safely, not, you know, in the middle of the road, anything stupid like that. And just a little short walk then down onto the road to get a nice clear view of this straight road. And then with the planner, the white line is the position of the galactic center. The gray line is where the galactic center rises. Black line is where the galactic center disappears. But I wanted to find the time when the galactic center was, you know, perfectly in line with this road. So just scrubbing through time. So it was about there. So about 1:30 in the morning, I knew that the Milky Way galactic center would be, you know, perfectly in line with this really long, straight southeast facing road.
Beautiful,
so that line there is really, really useful.
Yeah, amazing job, man.
Thank you. The next image is one from my home country in Wales. It's a lighthouse called South Stack in Anglesey.
Wow, so it's a lie when they say that you can see the night sky in the UK, right? No, that's the proof.
Yeah, of course you can see the night sky in the UK. It's funny, man. I mean, people are still surprised that you can see the Milky Way from the UK, and especially Wales, because of the weather we have. It's just always raining, like all the time. But no, when the skies do clear, we've got no moon in the sky. It's beautiful, especially in Wales. We've got lots of rural areas that are really good. But I wanted to share this image just to demonstrate that it's not always about the Milky Way core. A lot of people get very obsessed with the galactic center and the Milky Way core, but there's so much more to the Milky Way. And in particular, this is a couple of months after the end of what people call Milky Way season, what I call Milky Way core season. You don't always have to have the core in your image. There are other areas of the Milky Way that are worthy of your attention all year round. Like, as far as I'm concerned, Milky Way season never finishes. Milky Way core season finishes. There's only 6 months of the year you can see the galactic core, but all year round you can see some part of the Milky Way. And this section in particular is known as the Great Rift. Lots of dark nebula there, dark gases and dust running along, blocking our view of the Milky Way, actually. So yeah, it's not always about the Milky Way core. The good thing about these other areas of the Milky Way is that you can have compositions that you can't have with the Milky Way core. So this was facing directly west, and obviously I can't get a composition with the Milky Way core facing west. So you have to sort of make do with what part of the Milky Way you can get. And in this instance, it worked out quite nicely.
It's a really beautiful spot. What's the name of the lighthouse?
South Stack.
South Stack.
Yeah, it's right up in the north on a little island called Anglesey. Really, really beautiful place.
It's amazing. And then you use the lighthouse light to help you
Yeah,
lead
so
the
that
program,
was
right?
yeah. So I didn't use any lights on the foreground. It's all coming from the lighthouse, and it was really difficult because it was so windy, and I was hanging like on this really steep cliff, and I'm like, I had to have this composition which was like in the most awkward place, and I'm like perched on these rocks with like 50-mile-an-hour winds just blasting me, and I had to work out how long the shutter speed needed to be for the beams, and then timing the shutter perfectly to get the symmetry. And it took me quite a number of times to do it, but in the end, I think it was worth it.
Definitely is a stunning image, man.
This is another similar example. Again, you've just got so the Great Rift is there, and further up, this is one of my favorite regions of the Milky Way, the Cygnus region, because it's part of the constellation Cygnus. So again, just areas of the Milky Way. You don't necessarily have to have the core. And the three bright stars here, what's called it's an asterism known as the Summer Triangle. So you got Vega, Altair, and Deneb that make up the Summer Triangle.
Oh man, I'm learning so many things now. It's true. We're always focusing on the core of the Milky Way, and that's true. The Milky Way is visible every day and night. It is not cloudy, of course. So it's all about making work our galaxy with the foreground, right, and make it work for the story you want to tell.
Exactly. And then next up we go.
We have a question. Alyn,
okay.
About the photo of the lighthouse one.
Yeah.
How can we get, which Joel Sauda Borthrow is asking, how can we get the light of the lighthouse like this?
It's literally just the way it is. I mean, not all lighthouses are like this.
What you do is like you take a special shot to capture the beams, and then you blend it on your photo?
No. It was literally, this is a panorama, all of the same settings.
Awesome.
But there was no sort of blending of the lights on top of it. It's quite lucky because I'm higher than the lighthouse, so it doesn't really like cause too much flare.
Yeah, that's important.
If I was lower down and sort of same height as the lighthouse, it would be really difficult because the light would be sort of straight into the camera. But because I'm above the light, it was quite easy. I don't know if it looks like this every night. I think you need like a little bit of sea mist. Wow. So you need the sea to be a little bit rough. So as long as there's a little bit of mist over the sea, you'll see the beams. But I think, I mean, not all lighthouses are like this. I think there's one in Dorset called Portland Bill, which also had lights like this. But I think recently they've swapped the lights to LED lights.
Oh.
I don't think it has the beams anymore, which is really sad. So this is quite old sort of style bulbs. That's literally how it is. I have a vlog on YouTube called How to Take Milky Way Selfies. And you can see video footage of that lighthouse at night, and you can see exactly how the beams look, and it's pretty much what you see in the photograph like that.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Awesome, thank you, man.
So just jumping back to Tenerife quickly, this little image here of the Milky Way core rising behind Teide Observatory, the observatory on Tenerife. And I'm just going to bring up the plan for that. If I go back to my stuff. So this was the plan that I put together for this one. And if I just zoom in, so I seen, the telescopes up on the hill when I was driving around in the daytime. I was like, I want to get the Milky Way behind there. So I kind of know that, the Milky Way rises in the southeast. I'm going to have to be to the northwest of the telescopes. And then, as I mentioned earlier, you've always got to think about access. So I was driving along this road, and you can see there's a little car park here. So I know, okay, I can park my car here, no problem. And then I need to get to the northwest of the telescope. So there's this really convenient path where you can walk and then get yourself to the northwest of the telescopes. Now, the other thing here is that the telescopes are up on a hill. I'm looking up. So you have to work out when the Milky Way is going to get past the hill. So to do that, you use the target pin here. So you press this once, and you can move this pin for your target subject. So I just put it here, and then it tells you here the difference in altitude, or it tells you up the top the difference in altitude is 8.7 degrees. So for people who don't understand, the horizon is 0 degrees. The point of sky that's directly above you is 90 degrees. And then that's 45 degrees. And if you want to measure it roughly, you can use your hands. If you stretch out your hand, so you have a straight hand, close your fist, that distance there covers about 10 degrees of sky. So if I put my bottom of my hand on the horizon, I know the telescopes are going to be almost to the top of my fist. So then I have to work out the time the Milky Way is going to be at that sort of altitude. So if I just put time back just to show, and then on the top, I can scroll across until we have the Milky Way information just here. So the galactic center. And then as I scrub through time, you'll see the elevation of the galactic center changing. And I need it to be about 8, 9, 10 degrees. So somewhere about here. So I know I'm in the right place now because the Milky Way is going to be at 12 degrees. So it's going to be above the hill, which is 8 degrees up. And the other way you can see is if you keep an eye on the white line, you see it goes dotted. That means you can't see the galactic center because it's behind the terrain. And then, whoop, there it will come up above the terrain. So I know then that it's going to be nice and perfect behind those telescopes.
Yeah, it's an amazing trick. I mean, you need to understand the topography really well to plan the shot. Yeah, we have a question for this shot from Judy Horton. When you have yourself in the shot, is that a short exposure, or do you just try to stay really still?
I stay really still.
Yeah, there's nothing there.
It's quite, I mean, the biggest tip I can give for that is go far away from the camera and use a wide angle lens. Like the smaller you are in the image, the more freedom you have to, the camera doesn't notice that you're moving. If you stand really close to the camera will see you blurry and it will see that you've moved a little bit during the exposure. But what I like to do is go a little bit far away from the camera. It doesn't need to be that far. If you've got a wide angle lens on, it really doesn't need to be that far. Just make sure you're small in the frame. I typically hold my breath as well. So I'll make sure I've got really good footing. So quite often you'll see me with like one of my legs is sort of, like this. If I go back, and that just really helps you stay stable. You see, one leg like this. And then I breathe in really deep and I hold my breath for like 30-40 seconds, and that just helps me stay really, really still. And I always focus on a star. So with my eyes, I'll just like look at a star, and that really helps you keep your balance and stay still as well.
Nice tip. Also, George is asking us if you were using any kind of, sky guider or tracker.
I was literally just about to say, I was just about to talk about it, because this image here was shot with a 50mm lens. So I had to use a star tracker for this one, and I usually use the. I don't know if you want to make it full screen. Can you see?
Yeah, I'll do that. Here we are.
Yeah. So how can I do this? I'm going to break something. So I use a move, shoot, move star tracker, which is super light and portable. You can see it's really, really small. I use this for all of my wide angle stuff up to like 135mm. It's just so small, so lightweight that I just have it in my bag all the time. And it's really good for wide angle tracking. So that's the move, shoot, move. And you can get 5% off as well if you use code Alyn, ALYN. But I mean, you can see how small it is. It's so good. I'll put it
awesome
there. But yeah, that's just
so
super
how
light.
long have you been using this tracker?
About 2 years now.
2 years now, yeah. So it's
2 years.
When you invest in a good tracker, is like all the gear.
Oh man, just the thing with the tracker is that whatever camera you have, whatever lens you have, it makes them better.
Yeah.
Because like you can do a longer exposure, so you get cleaner images. And if you have a lens that's like doesn't really perform well at f2.8, or maybe your lens only opens up to f4, you could do a longer exposure and get much better quality images. So like a star tracker, doesn't matter what camera, what lens you have, it improves that camera and it improves that lens. It's like if you're serious about astrophotography, it's a no-brainer, man.
Awesome.
If I'm doing any telephoto stuff like really big lenses, I'll use the Skywatcher Star Adventurer Pro for like a 400mm or a 600mm lens.
Awesome.
Next up is just a similar image to the previous one, really, just talking about trackers. This is the Cygnus region of the Milky Way. The bright star there is Deneb. And my camera's been astro modified, so I get extra sensitivity in what's called hydrogen alpha emissions, which is like this pink sort of red color that's emitted by hydrogen alpha emission nebulae. So this image here was 135mm Samyang lens. I think it was 2 shots for the foreground and then 3 shots for the sky with the star tracker. So, you know, when you're using these longer lenses, star trackers really help you out.
Yeah. Well, what's the name again of the star tracker you're using?
Move, shoot, move.
Move, shoot, move. So, but by the way, guys, we're going to leave the list of gear Alyn uses in the description of the video, so you can check it after the class. So no worries about taking notes. Just enjoy. Thank you,
Alyn. What else have I got for you? So this one here from La Palma.
Nice.
Again, one of my favorite panoramas. Really nice to get the moon and the Milky Way in the same image. So again, PhotoPills is really helpful with this one. But I think I'll talk about the plan for this one a bit later, because I'm going to go in depth about one of my panorama shots.
Awesome.
And then I can talk about this one a bit later, because it's like the same as that one, but like a little extra step to it with the moon. But you can see Jupiter there. Saturn, I think, was in front of the core, and that was Mars. So you got the 3 planets, the moon. It was just like the most amazing celestial spectacle.
Yeah, it's amazing. The moon is really, you know, cherry on the cake.
Yeah.
In this image.
And testament to how dark it is, because you can still see the Milky Way even though like the moon's coming up.
Yeah,
it's crazy. This is one of my favorite panoramas from La Palma. I just love the colors. So you've got the yellow of the light pollution, which I don't mind when you have a little bit. It just adds a nice bit of color to your image. And then the green color in the sky is a phenomenon called aglow, where molecules in the atmosphere are basically slowly emitting light because they've been absorbing energy from the UV rays of the sun, and then they emit this light in the night sky. Sometimes it's really annoying and it kind of blocks your view of the Milky Way or something, but sometimes it just adds a really nice splash of color to the image, and it really complements the green and the yellow of the foliage in the foreground. So there's like a real nice harmony going on between the sky and the foreground. And then again, you can see me quite far away from the camera with one leg perched on a rock to keep myself nice and steady. A nice panorama of the Milky Way.
And again, here the light pollution is helping you get that beautiful silhouette.
Yeah, it really helps it to like pop and stand out, doesn't it?
Yeah, you guys, when there is light pollution, just use it right in the image. You just take advantage.
Yeah, exactly, man.
Of it.
Yeah, you gotta play with the cards you dealt, as they say.
Yeah, amazing image.
And so finally, this one, I'm going to talk in depth about this one. I think this is the one where we can go deep and talk about settings and all that stuff. And
awesome.
But this was in the Atacama Desert in Chile.
Oh yeah.
In South America, really dry, if you couldn't tell by the image, and it looks like Mars. Really felt like we were on Mars. But I just saw this canyon on Google Maps before we sort of went adventuring in that area, and I was like, we really should check out this canyon. And we found a few spots like this, but this one for me was like the perfect one to get this, you know, really nice like loop and curve in the foreground. And so if I just bring up PhotoPills,
It's impressive to see how high is the core in Chile. Huh?
Oh, so jealous, man.
Oh my gosh.
It's so good down in the southern hemisphere. But this was the spot on Google Maps. You can see the canyon there. I'm just going to show people quickly that if you click on these little two squares here, you can change the sort of maps and what you see. So the map type at the moment, I got hybrid. You could just use sort of standard. So you can choose the one that helps you plan a lot better. You can see on Google Maps, they don't really have the canyon visible, which is why I changed it to the hybrid, which shows you like satellite and sort of roads and stuff.
Nice.
So that's perfect. And yeah, I just wanted to do a nice Milky Way panorama arching over this bend that you see here. So sort of scrubbing through time. Now, when the Milky Way is here, you really cannot do a panorama because the Milky Way is like directly over your head. Yeah. If you try and capture all of that in a huge panorama, you end up with an insane amount of distortion when you try and put that into a 2D rectangle. So you really have to wait until the Milky Way is low and sort of arching over the horizon rather than arching over your head. So when I scrub forward in time, you can see, oh, let me just click and hold there. So as I scrub forward, you can see the Milky Way starting to get lower and lower. And, you know, something about there would be perfect for this shot. So you've got the Milky Way arching nice and low, and you don't end up with any crazy distortion. But this shot was taken on, I mean, it is in full a 360-degree panorama, which I need to sort out soon. But when I do huge panoramas like this,
I mean, this image is just mind-blowing.
Thanks, man. But when I do panoramas, I use this panoramic head, so I can put my camera here. Which way? This way. But this nearly knocked myself out. And that way you can rotate the camera around the no parallax point so that you don't get any distortion when you rotate the camera. And then you can change the angle here, like this. And it means that you can do a 360-degree panorama very quickly, very quickly. And you only need, I think it's 22 shots to do a 360-degree panorama. But if I wasn't using that device, you'd need about, oh God, I don't know, about 40, 50 shots just to try and get a good chance of it stitching together. So that really helps. And the other bit of advice I always give with panoramas is don't use a super wide lens. Don't use a 14, 15, 16 mil because they have so much distortion. When you try and stitch them in software, the software just is really confused and everything is distorted between shots. So I always try and do my panoramas with a 24 mil or a 35 mil because they have much less distortion and the software has a much easier time stitching the images together.
Nice tip. Alyn, can you show us again the panorama head?
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I'll maximize your image so people can really see it.
It's the Leo Photo LEP 02. Like this.
Yeah.
And you have notches here, so I can choose how much degrees it turns every time. I do 36 degrees. So that means it sort of clicks into place every 36 degrees.
Nice.
And that makes it so much quicker, especially when you're in the dark and you can't, you don't want to turn your light on. You don't want to try and look at like some dials or some scales. It's nice that in the dark, I can just do this and I know I'm ready for the next shot. I do this and I know I'm ready for the next shot. I don't need to turn my light on. I don't need to mess around. It really helps.
Nice.
And you normally do like something like this. You do one big row of 10 shots. And then you do one big row of 10 shots like this. And then one shot for the sky and one shot for the floor. And you can create a 360-degree
nice
image. nice and quickly.
Yeah, panoramas probably are one of the hardest things to do, right?
Yeah, I mean, something like that makes it so much easier. But
yeah, definitely.
let me pull that down. Especially with the software side of things, there's nothing worse than taking 20, 30 images and it doesn't stitch in the software.
Yeah,
it's really handy.
What software do you use for stitching panorama?
If it's a big panorama, I'll use software called PTGUI, PTGUI. I think it costs about £100 or €100, but it's so good, so good.
Yeah, I mean, in photography, yeah, the more you invest, the better. The more help you get, right? Awesome.
It's not a cheap hobby.
No, it's not. It's a passion, right?
Yeah. Or an addiction, maybe.
An addiction. Yeah. We have a question from Judy Jacquelic. What would be the longest focal length you use for a panorama? And would you combine it with a tracker?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, when you start using longer focal lengths, you really should use a tracker, because the longer the focal length, the shorter your shutter speed has to be before the stars trail. So yeah, I'm just started getting into 85mm panoramas. I was doing 50mm. I've been doing 50mm panoramas with the tracker, and they just look amazing. So now I wanted to go a little bit deeper and do 85mm, but like just sort of go up in increments. Try 35mm, try 50mm, just keep going. But I'm trying now. This is like my next sort of project is 85mm panoramas.
Any photo you're going to include in your upcoming night sky photography book?
Sorry?
Any image? Is that image that you just mentioned?
I think all of these are going to be in the book. Yeah, I have a book coming out September, October time, called Photographing the Night Sky, and it's going to cover everything about photographing the night sky.
Can't wait, man.
For wide angle landscape stuff. But I don't know if you want to go into like settings and stuff.
Yeah, please.
So the settings that I used for this photograph, it was the A7S II with a 24mm lens, the Sony 24mm G Master lens, which is absolutely phenomenal. With the aperture, obviously the wider the aperture, the more light you let in. So I typically shoot these panoramas at f2. I'm always shooting between f2 f2.8. But when I do these panoramas, I want to try and collect as much light as possible. So I open up to f2. I could open up to f4, but that would mean that I have a very small depth of field, so not much of the image is going to be in focus. And because I don't want to change any settings during the entire panorama, I'd rather just stop down to f2 and get a little bit of extra depth of field. The shutter speed, I usually use the 500 rule. Like if we load up spot stars in PhotoPills, so I shoot A7 III. I was shooting with an A7S II, if I can find it. A7S II. So I chose my camera. I was shooting at f2. 24mm, let's just say 45 for the minimum declination. Yeah, you can see the 500 rule says 21 seconds. The MPF rule tells me 17.83. That's because I'm using such a low megapixel camera. It's really useful for astrophotography. So yeah, I typically shoot about 20 seconds for these panoramas. I mean, if I was using, for example, the A7 III, the MPF rule only tells me to use 13 seconds.
Yeah.
Which, if you're doing stacking and you're doing big prints, it's advisable to use the MPF rule. But if you're doing a single exposure or a panorama of single exposures, I always use the 500 rule, just because it means, you get a little bit of extra light. And even if the stars are trailing a little bit, this image is so big, this panorama is so big, you'll never see the star trailing. Because the star trailing is so small compared to the overall size of the image. So I'll typically just stick to the 500 rule if I was doing something like this.
That's true. I mean, the shutter speed for the Milky Way, it all depends on your taste, right? And the goal you have with your image. It's all about trying different shutter speeds and see what's working for you.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people have, you know, a lot of people doing like big commercial prints or something. They want to have perfectly round stars, or you know, if you're just sharing on the web, the 500 rule is enough. You might have a little bit of star trailing, but nobody's going to notice you have star trailing. But I think, you know, if you really want to have perfectly round stars, you should just be using a star tracker anyway. So that way you can go for 2 minutes or 3 minutes or 4 minutes and get amazing detail. I think with the ISO, it doesn't really matter too much with my Sony cameras because they're ISO invariant, but I probably shot at like 3200 or 6400 just so I could preview the image on the back of the screen. But if you have an ISO variant camera, you want to make sure you are using 3200, 6400.
Awesome. And what about focusing? What technique do you
so
use?
with the focusing, I mean, most of the time, I focus on the stars using live view on the back of the camera. I'll zoom in on a bright star or a planet and I'll focus on that. If I'm close to my foreground or if I feel like my foreground is out of focus, I'll do a focus stack. So I'll start with one image on the stars, focus on the stars, and then I focus on the foreground and I keep focusing closer and closer and closer. And then I take all of those images and stack them in Photoshop in a focus stack, which is really easy. You select all the images in the same document in Photoshop, and I think you just go to Edit, Auto Blend, images, and then it just choose Focus Stack, and it does it all for you. It's amazing. But when I'm doing a panorama like this, I don't want to be changing focus all the time and like focusing on the stars, and then my foreground is gone. So when I'm doing a panorama like this, I want to try and maximize my depth of field in, you know, a single exposure. So that's where I would use the depth of field. So we can use, I was shooting with the A7S II. I was shooting at 24 millimeters. And so yeah, with an A7S II 24 millimeter lens at f2, the hyperfocal distance is 9.62 meters. So in order to maximize the depth of field, I would have to focus at the hyperfocal distance, which is 9.62 meters. I think it's probably easier to show that with the other.
With the hyperfocal table, maybe.
Oh no, it was an image on your website, isn't it, where you can sort of see the depth of field.
Yeah. If you go to the calculator, to the depth of field calculator, DOF, and then you can swipe the screen. You can see it on
there it is
on the picture. And also, if you tap on the AR button, you can also see it on the augmented reality view, just to know where exactly.
In the augmented reality, yeah.
Yeah.
So if I bring up you can see my bedroom.
Yeah, beautiful bedroom, by the way, better than my studio here.
It's really tidy this side. It's really messy that side, but don't tell anyone. But yeah, you can use the augmented reality to show you where 9.6 meters away is, and then you would focus on that point. Now, obviously, this is quite difficult to do in the dark. You'd have to use a torch to light up the foreground, or maybe put your phone 9 meters away and focus on that. But yeah, if you look at this image here on the screen, so basically what happens with the hyperfocal distance is you have everything in acceptable focus from infinity, so that's the stars, to half of the hyperfocal distance towards you will be an acceptable focus.
If you swipe again, to the third screen.
Yeah, that's the
You'll
one.
see the one.
Yeah, so the hyperfocal distance is, for me, with my camera, 24mm f2, is 9.62 meters. So if I focus at 9.62 meters, everything from infinity to 4.81 meters from the camera is going to be in focus, or acceptable focus. And that's the most depth of field I can get out of these settings in this camera. So yeah, especially when I'm doing a panorama like this, I want to try and maximize the depth of field as much as possible. The last bit of advice I would give is it's obviously quite difficult to work out how far 9 meters is. So just to be safe, just make sure you focus a little bit further than the hyperfocal distance, because if you focus too close, the stars go really blurry quite quickly. So just to be on the safe side, I'd sort of round that up to 10 meters, just to make sure I'm not losing that infinity focus.
Yeah, it's a great tip. It's better to focus at a larger distance. If you fall short, probably you'll 100% you're gonna get the stars as blurred.
Bokeh, yeah.
Bokeh, yeah.
Exactly.
So when you're focusing, out of 10 images, how many times do you use like a focus stacking technique? Do you focus stack a lot?
It's a good question. I try to avoid it as much as I can. Why has that happened? I try and avoid it as much as I can. I only really do it with like a super wide angle lens. When I'm sort of really up close and personal to the foreground. I'm just going to double check my charger because for some reason my computer is not charging.
No worries. I love the live streams, you know.
Okay, saved it. Whew. Okay, we're back. Yeah, how often do I focus stack? I mean, I used to overcomplicate things, and I used to want to do like focus stack and stacking and tracking and everything in the same shot. But now that I'm sort of traveling so much and I've always got work on and stuff to do, I try and make my workflow as efficient as possible. So I only really do a focus stack if I'm like really up close and personal. So in this image, you know, I'm quite close to the flowers. I want them to be in focus. I can show you another example. It's basically a way to exaggerate your foreground subject and just to get really up close and personal.
Yeah, definitely. When you have a subject or something that close,
it's usually rocks or flowers.
Yeah,
something like flowers. This. Yeah, so this is another example where, you know, it's just a small bunch of daisies in the floor, but when you get up close and personal with a wide angle lens, you know, they fill the frame, and, you know, just a small intimate scene becomes really awesome. This would be another example. Just sort of getting up close and personal. Again, just that idea of having something nice and close in the foreground just adds all that depth to the image. So there's sort of layers of depth. This is the foreground, the midground, off to the distance, and then the backdrop of sky. I think again this was another focus stack, because again I was quite close to the foreground.
I see that you really find really cool subjects. How much time do you invest in the scouting?
I'd say a lot. It's quite important to scout, especially in landscape astrophotography, because you're working at night. I mean, especially in a place like Tenerife, if you go out on a night in Teide National Park when there's no moon in the sky, it's insanely dark. So it's really difficult to find a good image. You know, you might be able to find things in the foreground, but trying to create a sort of harmony between the foreground, the midground, the distance, it's really hard to do in the night time. So yeah, I try and spend as much time as possible just going out to a location and exploring. And what I really love about scouting in this aspect is that I'm not worried about taking shots. I'll just have my smartphone with me, and I'm just enjoying a location, and I'm walking around and just, oh, that looks interesting. What's that? And just go and look and just really be like almost like a child, where the child just has like this really innocent curiosity. There's just, oh, what's that over there? And you just go over there and have a little look and like just really follow your curiosity and find some things, and then start thinking about, which direction am I facing? Is the Milky Way going to be there at some point, or is it facing another direction? I can do something else with the night sky. So yeah, it's really, really important to scout in the daytime. And that was another thing I was going to show actually.
Yeah, but Antonio Cladera, the photographer of the PhotoPills team, he always says that if you want to succeed at night, you need to work during daytime, right? I mean, scouting
absolutely,
is such
yeah. It's so funny how like every time there's clear skies, especially in Wales, like my inbox is just full of people sending me messages like, I'm in a dark field, what can I photograph?
Really?
Yeah, they're just lost at night, and I'm like, look, you've got to put the work in the daytime. Didn't want to do that, but what I was going to show quickly. So for example, when you make and save a plan in PhotoPills, you can add notes and also images. So you can take reference images, and save them, from the daytime. So I sort of have an idea of what my photograph's going to look like, and then I've obviously just got a plan, pray.
Yeah. Pray.
Yeah.
Imagine plan shoot, and then you need to pray.
Yeah. But yeah, it's really good to just enjoy a landscape. Go out and take your smartphone, take some reference images, see what you find, and yeah, just really enjoy it, man. I mean, I used to do it myself, but a lot of people now travel to locations just to take photographs they've already seen other people take.
Yeah.
And I understand. When I was a beginner, I used to do it myself. You go to Iceland and you have to go to Skogafoss, and you have to go to Kirkjufell, and but you'll start getting a lot more enjoyment out of it if you just go to a location with no expectations. Yeah, you got an idea of some good areas to check out and explore, but just go there and enjoy it and follow your own curiosity. And then when you create an image that's like quite intimate and that's like, purely your creativity, you get so much more from it.
Yeah,
so much more.
Definitely. So scouting and then letting your imagination fly, find your composition, your shot, and just have fun.
Yeah, and it's really funny, when I went to Tenerife, I never expected to be like on my knees taking a photograph of a little daisy bush, but it's like, really intimate. One of my favorite little images as well. So.
No, it's beautiful. Alyn, I have a few questions here, if you don't mind.
Sweet. Yeah.
Darko is asking, do you fix the auto white balance to fix the Kelvin value to avoid changes of the white balance between the shots in a panorama? Or how does do you use auto white balance or manual?
Yeah, I normally use auto white balance just to save the fuss, to be honest. And obviously because I shoot in RAW, it doesn't matter what white balance I use. But if I'm doing a panorama and I've shot all the images on auto white balance, I will make sure that the white balance is exactly the same for all of the images before I stitch them together. But most of the time I just leave my white balance on auto because I always fix the white balance in post-production anyway. So I don't really care what my white balance is in the field. I'll just stick it on auto and deal with the white balance when I get to Lightroom later on.
Awesome. Another question from Steve Millington. For a non-panoramic image, if you use a star tracker to increase the exposure to 3 or 4 minutes, do you still stack multiple long exposures, or does the star tracker stop the need for exposed stacking?
I mean, there's no right or wrong answer to this question. You can track and stack tracked images, but typically I'd say you wouldn't need to. I mean, it probably depends on how old your camera is. If you have a really old camera, then you probably might have to. But if I'm tracking the night sky and I do a 3-minute exposure at ISO 800, I wouldn't stack it, to be honest, because it just looks so clean and beautiful.
Yeah.
So again, going back to what I was saying earlier, I try not to overcomplicate things these days. If I'm tracking the night sky, I'm doing a panorama of 2 or 3 shots with a 24mm. I would just do one tracked exposure, create that panorama. I wouldn't bother stacking. If you're doing like a long focal length, like a 50mm or an 85mm, it makes more sense to do tracked exposures, multiple tracked exposures, and stack those. Definitely makes sense. But if it's 20mm, 24mm, 35mm, single tracked exposures are stunning.
Beautiful, beautiful. Another question from Leon. Do you have any tips for using night filters during night photography, like these light pollution night filters, lens filters?
Yeah. The thing with light pollution filters, I mean, it's a tough one, man. People expect them to work miracles, but they don't. It's like a really small help in getting better night skies. It does help in areas you've got lots of yellow light pollution. It definitely helps cut down on the yellow light. But don't expect them to do miracles. I always use them with my Astro modified cameras. I briefly talked earlier that my cameras have had a filter ripped off the front of the sensor. So I had to take the camera apart. I sent it to a guy in the Netherlands, JTW Astronomy. They take the camera apart, rip off a filter from the front of the sensor, and that way I get extra sensitivity in what's called hydrogen alpha light, which I briefly talked about earlier, that pink-red color you see in the night sky. And the light pollution filters really help make hydrogen alpha emission nebulae stand out. So I definitely recommend light pollution filters if you have an Astro modified camera. If you don't have an Astro modified camera, don't expect the light pollution filter to work miracles, but it does help.
Oh, awesome.
The other filter I use is
Let's see what you have here.
This secret filter.
We love gadgets.
This is actually my filter. It's not out yet. It should be out within the next 2 or 3 months. It's called a Star Glow filter. Yeah. It's been manufactured with a company called Case.
What's the name of the filter again?
Star Glow.
Star Glow.
Yeah. So if I show you this image when it loads, it basically makes bright stars of glow and bloat. So if you see here, you can see Ursa Major, the Big Dipper. Actually, I can show you like a before and after. Star Glow. So yeah, this is before. So this is Mount Teide in Tenerife with just like a normal nightscape. And then when you use the filter, you see?
Wow.
Now you can see Ursa Major, Ursa Minor, Polaris, and really makes the constellations just pop. Yeah.
So cool, man.
I'm really excited, man. It was supposed to be ready September last year, also October last year. And then we had this huge setback with the Chinese government. A really long, boring story. But we're back on track, and it should be ready soon.
Do you know? Can you advance any date or?
I don't want to do that because I told my followers, I was like, it's coming, and then it didn't come, and I was like, oh no, what am I going to do? So now it's just like, I don't want to give a date.
Yeah, you'll announce it on your YouTube channel. So you guys, please subscribe to Alyn's YouTube channel. You want to keep updated?
Please, yeah. There's another example with just the Orion constellation and Sirius. Yeah, it's gonna be awesome.
Yeah, definitely. Awesome. Do you have any other gadgets? Like, how do you fight, for example, moisture? Like, do you?
Yeah, so I have this one here, lens warmer.
A lens warmer. Let me see.
Yeah.
And this is something that you attach around your lens.
Yeah.
Warm it up. Okay.
So like you can just, it's got a little bit of Velcro. You just wrap it around like this. And then you plug this into like a USB power bank to power it. So it works with normal USB power banks. And then
yeah, nice.
Keeps your lens nice and warm. And as long as the lens is warm, it stops any moisture from condensing onto the front of the lens. So it's a really neat solution, especially if you're doing time lapse or star trails or something like this.
Yeah, definitely. And I suppose you're not touching the camera, right? You're using like an intervalometer or shutter release.
Yeah, so I use this one. This is the, I gotta hide my face. Come on, focus. It's the Pixel TW283.
Nice.
The reason I use this one is because you can plug it in with a wire. But it's also wireless, so you can plug a receiver into your camera, and then you can control your camera completely wirelessly. And if I'm doing like my long distance selfies, I can just use the wireless remote. So it's perfect. And the one thing I found when I used to buy cheap intervalometers is they always broke when the cable on top would snap, and then you're screwed because there was just no way of fixing it. But because this one, the cable is removable, it's not going to break. So this one's lasted me like 2.5 years now. I have 2 of these.
Nice. We have another question here. Let me see. From Nix, could you share what backpack you use for hikes with sleeping in the when you're sleeping in the field? Do you have any separate bag for the photo equipment inside? Do you have any like tourist backpack, or how much weight do you usually carry with you?
So I use the Shimoda Explore 60 liter.
Nice. Waterproof.
This bag here, water resistant. I wouldn't say waterproof, but I have a rain cover just in case it rains. And then its rear access. This is really difficult. So all the camera gear comes in the back. The camera, all the gear. And then I find it like it looks small, this bag, but it kind of expands. So I normally get my sleeping bag in this front pocket here, and then I can get my tent in the top here. Nice. So in this top pouch, I have my tent, my food, a jacket, my cooking stove. So like this top, it kind of expands quite nicely. So it means I can use this on like a day shoot if I'm going out for a few hours. But if I'm camping, I can kind of just like get all my camping gear, get my sleeping bag and all that stuff in there. There's loads of straps on the outside as well. So you can strap stuff to the outside if you can't fit everything in your bag. So I have my 2 tripods on the outside, maybe my 10 poles, extra jacket, any stuff like that. So I've been really happy with that.
Do you bring with you any like lighting equipment, torches, panels, LED panels?
No, I don't bring any panels. I bring a very small LED panel for my vlogging setup. And I've always got 2 head torches. I always have to, like, because if one of my head torches breaks, I am screwed. So I've always got 2 head torches. This one, I use the Petzl Ticker.
Yeah. White line.
Petzl
light, right?
Actic Core. So it's got white and red.
So
astrophotographers and astronomers will always use red light to preserve night vision, because after 20 to 30 minutes in the dark, your eyes will relax and your pupils will open up, and you'll see a lot more detail in the dark and a lot more detail in the Milky Way. But if you look at a bright light, your pupils instantly contract, and then you lose that night vision, and you have to wait another 20, 30 minutes again to get it back. But the red light doesn't harm your night vision. It helps you preserve your night vision, and it just makes for a much better observing experience.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, when you're shooting with alone, it's great, but when you're shooting with other people, and all these red lights appear like
yeah.
in the frame. I suppose during your workshops you experience that. Do you ask people to bring like these red light headlamps during your workshops?
I mean, I don't demand it. I normally recommend it, but obviously if they've only got a white one, it's not a problem.
Yeah.
And with the workshops, it's just about having good communication and a system. So when you get to the location, you give the group sort of 10 to 15 minutes to look around and set the gear up. And once everyone's set up, then it's no light time. Yeah. If you want to see some buttons on your camera, just use your phone screen. Not the flash, just the screen. Just use the screen. And that's usually enough once your eyes have adjusted to the dark, and then you're not going to go and ruin sort of everybody else's images. So
yeah, talking about workshops, man, I can't wait to have you in Menorca in the PhotoPills camp.
Oh man, don't! I have to wait another year now.
Yeah, this is crap.
I'm so excited for this, man. I'm really, really excited for the PhotoPills workshop.
It's much fun, but man, this coronavirus is just killing our travel plans, and everybody's like upset.
Yeah, it's oh man, it's been a hard reset.
Yeah, but do you think that you'll be able to do your workshops in September, October? You don't know, right? It's tough to say.
Yeah. Everything's so uncertain right now.
Yeah.
But I mean, the good thing about what I do, the way I travel as an astrophotographer, is it's good for social distancing. So I'm hoping I can travel soon, because you go to a hotel and I sleep all day, and then I go at night, and so.
Yeah, we have this trip pending, the La Palma one.
Yeah, man. As soon as we're allowed.
Yeah, of course. Let's do that. We have another question here. Do you have any tips for blending foreground images and sky images to create natural transitions between the exposures?
Yeah. So if you've taken different exposures for the sky and the foreground, and you've used different settings, different exposure value, the most important thing is to equalize the exposure before you try and blend them. So if my foreground is 2 stops darker than the sky, I will increase the foreground by 2 stops or decrease the sky by 2 stops in Lightroom before I try and blend them together. So make sure they're sort of the same exposure value before you try and blend them together. And then blend them with layer masks. You can also use like a selection tool and then the select and refine tool in Photoshop. And if you want to see me use that, watch the end of my star trail tutorial on YouTube, because I blend the star trails onto a foreground. So you can see how I do that myself.
Nice. And somebody's asking if we can go really quick on the shooting workflow, since from the beginning when you set the tripod, then you turn your camera. Do you turn your noise reduction off?
Okay, yeah, good question. So there's usually two noise reduction settings in cameras. There's long exposure noise reduction and high ISO noise reduction. I always turn both of them off. High ISO noise reduction just kind of smooths up the JPEGs, which doesn't really matter, but I turn it off because it's a waste of processing time. And then the long exposure noise reduction, if you take a 20-second exposure, your camera will take another 20-second exposure, but with the shutter closed. And it's what's called a dark frame. So it's basically taking an exposure, but it's not collecting any light. It's just taking an exposure of your sensor. And what that does is it picks up any hot pixels or stuck pixels or what they call dark noise, thermal noise. And then you take that away from the light image to remove a little bit of noise. But obviously it means if you want to take a 20-second exposure, you have to wait 40 seconds to get the exposure. So I'd much rather turn it off and save myself the time in the field. I'd much rather spend my time in the field taking photos, and I can do my own noise reduction when I come back to Lightroom and Photoshop. So I turn both of the noise reductions off. I get to the location, set up my tripod, check the composition with my head torch maybe, so I'm in the right place. Turn the camera on, make sure your aperture is f2, f2.8, your ISO is 3200, 6400. Shutter speed obviously depends on your lens and how picky you are about star trails, but let's say 15 to 30 seconds. And then I need to focus, so I'll typically just quickly grab focus on a bright star or a planet. And I suppose a good tip is to take a test shot. What you can do is use the highest ISO setting on your camera, even if it's like 100,000. And then what that means is you can take a 1 second or a 2 second exposure and preview your composition just to check if you're happy with your composition. Once you're happy with your composition, bring the ISO back down, put your shutter speed back to normal, and then you can take your image.
Awesome. And how do you know that the shot is correctly exposed? Do you check the histogram?
Yeah.
Are you looking for a special histogram?
I mean, it's a long story to explain, but because the Sony cameras are ISO invariant, it doesn't matter. If I shoot at ISO 800, I can boost the exposure by like 5 times, and it doesn't make any difference. But if your camera is ISO variant, so if you're shooting with a Canon camera, for example, you want to make sure your histogram is looking good. Just make sure that most of the histogram is sort of bumped up from the left edge. You're usually not at risk of blowing your highlights unless you've got the moon or some street lights in your image. But just try and make sure the histogram is not bunched up against that left edge. Try and push it up as much as you can by perhaps bumping the ISO up or opening the aperture or extending the shutter speed, just to make sure that the bulk of the histogram is in the middle rather than sort of crushed against that left edge.
Awesome. I love these tips. Do you have any final tip or any mistake that you see happens a lot during your workshops?
That's an interesting question. Biggest mistake.
Bring food with you, right?
Sorry?
Bring food with you.
Yeah, definitely bring food. I always bring sugar. I have to have sugar because it really just keeps me going. Nice coffee and a little bit of sugar. It's just like a real good boost. A really good morale boost as well. Like when you're like tired and struggling, you have some Haribos and you're just like, okay, I'm ready. What's the biggest mistake? I suppose one other tip is if you don't have an intervalometer or a wireless shutter, just make sure you have a 2-second delay or a 5-second delay on your shutter button, because when you press the shutter button on your camera, it will shake a little bit. So just make sure you've got a 2-second delay so that when you press the button, your camera waits a couple of seconds and then the exposure starts when your camera's nice and still.
Nice. Thank you, man. I think I'm gonna just ask you the last question that we got, and Gabriel Talantino is asking, have you ever had any problems on your night trips with wildlife animals? Did you complete them?
I'm trying to think. I haven't been anywhere that dangerous. I think there was one time in Turkey where I sat on a rock and like a scorpion came up, but nothing really happened. There was one time in Wales when there was a fox it was either a fox or a badger, like in the bushes, and I couldn't see it, but obviously because my head torch was on, I could see its eyes, and it followed me forever, man. It was like nearly a kilometer. I could just see the fox just following me in the bushes because I could see its eyes. There was one time in Chile where not so much wildlife, I suppose it is wildlife, but a cactus. There's these really big cactus, and the spikes on the cactus are, my God, they are so big and strong. And I was just walking, and one just went boom right through the bottom of my shoe.
Oh.
And like, man, it was like straight through the shoe into the foot. It like pierced the foot, and I was like, fuck. And then I tried to take it out of my shoe, and it snapped. and like
No.
it was like perfectly at the shoe, and I was like trying to, I was like, no, 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 like, and I was like, I can't take my shoe off because my foot is like physically stuck in by this spike, and I can't get it out because it snapped like right next to the sole of the shoe, and I was like, I ended up biting it and pulling it out with my teeth.
Adventurous. When you're out there, you don't know what's gonna happen.
Yeah, man.
That must be that's painful, right? To have a needle in your foot like this.
Yeah,
My
it
God.
just really, really frustrating. I was walking like a weird person for the rest of the trip as well.
Unbelievable, unbelievable. Well, man, Alyn, thanks so much for being on the show. It's been amazing. I mean, I love you. I love your work. How can
Right back at you,
people?
man.
Yeah. Before we say goodbye, maybe let's share with us how can we reach you? How can people get in touch with you?
So come and follow me on YouTube. I'm really focused on YouTube now, especially with lockdown. So I'd love to have people come over to YouTube, enjoy the free videos and tutorials and vlogs and adventures over on YouTube.
I love
Also
the
on
videos.
Instagram. And
I love the videos you
thanks,
make
man.
on how to what to photograph for a certain month.
Yeah.
What's
The
in the
what's in the,
sky.
yeah. So every month I do like a what's in the night sky video where I tell you about the events of the night sky for the month ahead. So it sort of helps you with your planning. But yeah, come on over to YouTube. I mean, I'm on Instagram and Facebook, but YouTube for me is like, I feel so much more connected to the audience. Like it's so genuine. The connection between the creator and the audience, because Instagram and Facebook now is so fake. But YouTube is really, really genuine. And if you want to find out about my book and my filter and any new stuff, just sign up to my mailing list on my website. Also, my workshops, the only place I advertise is my mailing list. I don't advertise publicly. It's only on my mailing list. So head on over to my website, sign up to my mailing list, and then I'll see you over on YouTube, hopefully.
Yeah, amazing. By the way, guys, we'll put all the links in the description of this video, probably tomorrow or on Friday. But yeah, we're going to add the gear list Alyn uses, and also his website and social networks. And above all, go and check the YouTube channel. He is doing an amazing job there. So, my friend, thanks so much again.
Thank you so much, man. It's been a pleasure. And hopefully we'll do that trip to La Palma soon.
I hope so. I hope so. Here in Spain, things are getting better and better, and
yeah,
hopefully in end June we'll be able to travel inside Spain. And the government just announced that in July people will be able to travel from abroad to Spain. But I don't know how things are going on there in the UK, but it seems that we are on the right track here, at least.
Fingers crossed, man. Fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed. So thank you again. Thank you, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. It's been a pleasure. And I'll see you in the next video. And remember that you have the power to imagine, plan, and shoot legendary photos. Bye-bye. See you in the next video. Take care.